Gail gently places the box in his hands. On the top, in familiar, slanted handwriting, are the words, "To Gina, from Daddy. Open it when you're ready." Dean's fingers curl tightly around the gift. His breath grows uneven. For a moment, he says nothing. Then, quietly, without looking up, he whispers, "Where exactly did you find this?" "In your study," Gail replies, "in that little cabinet under the shelves. It must have been there for a long time." Dean lowers his gaze to the box, and in an instant, time folds in on itself. The years blur, the noise of the television disappears, and he is no longer an aging legend sitting alone on Christmas Eve. He's a younger man again, a father who never got to say what he needed to say. His hand shakes as he touches the ribbon. "Daddy, are you sure you want to open it?" Gail asks gently. Dean doesn't answer. His eyes glisten. He pulls the box closer, presses it to his chest, and when he finally opens it, what he finds inside does something no critic, no scandal, no heartbreak had ever done to him before. It brings Dean Martin, the king of cool, crashing down to his knees. This is the story of that gift, of the daughter he lost, the words he never spoke, and the night he finally faced them. Dean Martin, the world's coolest man, and the one role. He never mastered to the world. Dean Martin was effortless. He was the man who strolled onto a stage like it was his living room, drink in hand, tie slightly loose, as if he'd just wandered in by accident. He'd croon a ballad, crack a joke, stumble for effect, and have an entire room wrapped around his finger without even trying. To millions, he was the smooth voice on the radio, the charming host on TV, the Rat Pack legend alongside Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., the king of cool. But behind all the smoky lounges, the neon lights, and the endless applause, Dean Martin had a job far tougher than any performance in Las Vegas. He was a father. Dean had 8 children in total, sons and daughters from different marriages, each growing up in the long, dramatic shadow of one of the most famous entertainers in the world. He loved them deeply, but loving and knowing how to show it were two very different things. On stage, Dean could say anything. At home, he often struggled to say what mattered most, and with one daughter in particular, that struggle would haunt him for the rest of his life. The daughter who saw right through him. Her name was Gina. Beautiful, bright, sharp-tongued, and stubborn in all the ways that secretly made Dean proud and quietly terrified. Where most people saw Dean Martin the star, Gina just saw Daddy. She was the one who would roll her eyes when he tried to fake his way out of a serious conversation. "Come on, Daddy," she'd say. "You can turn the act off. It's just me." She saw the tiredness behind his jokes, the sadness behind his smile, the loneliness behind the applause, and that made their relationship complicated, because Dean had spent decades perfecting one thing: control. On stage, he directed the room. The timing, the laughter, the mood, it all belonged to him. But with Gina, he couldn't control anything. She questioned him. She challenged him. She dared to ask, "Why weren't you there? Why didn't you call? Why are you always somewhere else?" To the world, Dean Martin never looked rattled. With Gina, he often felt exposed. The argument he never forgot. One evening, years before that Christmas Eve, Dean and Gina had a fight that neither of them would ever forget. Gina was no longer a child. She was a young woman now, with dreams, plans, and a fierce desire to live her life on her own terms, away from the shadow of her father's fame. She wanted to work, to explore, to figure out who she was without the Martin name. Dean, already older, already worn down by show business, wanted something simpler. He wanted her close, safe, predictable. He wanted control, the one thing no parent truly gets. The argument started small, as they often do. A comment about her choices, a defensive reply, a raised voice. Then suddenly, years of unspoken frustration exploded. "You care more about the audience than you do about us," Gina shouted, tears in her eyes. You care about your image, your fans, your show, but when was the last time you cared about how I feel? Dean snapped back, stung and defensive. That's not fair. Everything I've ever done has been to give you kids a good life. Then why weren't you there, Daddy? Her voice cracked. Why do I only get the leftovers? The room went quiet. The words hung between them like a knife. She turned away, wiping her face. If you loved me as much as you love that applause, she whispered, you'd listen to me, just once. It was then that Dean made the mistake that would echo in his mind forever. He fired back not as a father, but as a man who was hurt. Well, if you don't like the life I've given you, he said coldly, you're free to walk away. Silence. Gina stared at him in disbelief. Fine, she finally said. Maybe I will. She grabbed her bag, opened the door, and left. The door closed. The house fell silent. And for the first time in a long time, Dean Martin, surrounded by everything money and fame could buy, felt completely and utterly alone. A father's regret, and a small, quiet plan. The next morning, the anger was gone. What replaced it was far worse. Regret. Dean replayed the argument again and again in his mind. The way her voice cracked, the way she asked him to just listen, the way his own pride refused to soften until it was too late. He wanted to call. He wanted to drive over, knock on her door and say, I'm sorry. But he was Dean Martin. He didn't beg. He didn't confess. He didn't do vulnerable. On stage, vulnerability was scripted, safe, controlled. In real life, it terrified him, so instead, he did something he understood. He bought a gift, not a flashy, showy, expensive toy, not diamonds, not a car, not some grand gesture to make headlines. No, he chose something small, personal, intimate, something that meant something only to them. A delicate, heart-shaped locket. Gold, simple, not too big. On the front, he had 2 letters engraved, G. D. Gina, Dean. Inside, he placed 2 tiny, carefully cut black and white photographs. In one, a 6-year-old Gina sits on his shoulders, her little arms wrapped around his forehead, her laughter frozen in time. In the other, Dean stands in their old kitchen in an apron, disastrously flipping pancakes, while Gina clings to his back, both of them grinning like fools. He remembers that morning. He'd canceled a rehearsal just to make her breakfast. The pancakes were terrible. The memory was perfect. Then, Dean sat down at his desk, took out a sheet of stationery, and began to write. His hand shook slightly. This wasn't a song. This wasn't a script. This was something much harder, a letter to his daughter. The letter he couldn't bear to deliver. He wrote slowly, crossing things out, starting again, fighting with words that came so easily on stage and so painfully on paper. Finally, he managed this. Dear Gina, I know sometimes you think I don't understand you. I know sometimes you feel like you're talking to Dean Martin and not Daddy. The truth is, I'm just a man who doesn't always know how to say what he feels. I've spent my whole life pretending to be confident, charming, in control, but with you, I'm often scared. Scared of losing you, scared of saying the wrong thing, scared that one day you'll look back and only remember the empty seats where I should have been. This locket is for you. Inside is one picture of you and one of me. Not on a stage, not in a studio, just us in a kitchen making bad pancakes and good memories. Whenever you feel like I chose the spotlight over you, I want you to open this and remember that the best moments of my life were not on stage. They were with you. You are not Dean Martin's daughter to me. You are simply my Gina. That's all that has ever really mattered. I love you more than any song I ever sang, more than any applause I ever heard, more than any crowd that ever called my name. Your forever Daddy, Dean. He folded the letter carefully and placed it under the locket inside a small box. He wrapped the box in soft paper, tied it with a red ribbon, and wrote the words. To Gina, from Daddy. Open it when you're ready. His plan was simple. The next time he saw her, the next quiet moment, the next time the air was calm and the anger gone, he would hand it to her. Not with a speech, not with jokes, just the gift, just the letter, a silent, "I'm sorry," a simple, "I love you." But that moment never came, because life had other plans. The call no parent should hear. There are many ways to tell the story of a loss. The newspapers report it in a line or two. Biographies compress it into a short, painful paragraph. But for a parent, it all comes down to one instant. The instant the phone rings. The instant the voice on the other end says, "I'm afraid there's been an accident." Whether it's a car crash, an illness, a sudden collapse, it almost doesn't matter, because after that sentence, the rest of the details blur. The words, "didn't make it," land like a hammer. Everything else is noise. For Dean, that phone call arrived on an ordinary day. No spotlight, no cameras, just a room, a phone, and a voice. He listened. He went still. The cigarette in his hand burned down to the filter. His daughter, his Gina, gone. He put the phone down. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He just sat there. Then, slowly, like a man moving underwater, he walked to his study. He opened the small cabinet beneath his shelves. He reached to the back and found the gift. The wrapping paper was still perfect. The ribbon still bright. He held it for a long time. Then, quietly, he pushed it farther back, behind the files, behind the folders, out of sight. But never, for a single day, out of mind. He couldn't bear to give it away. He couldn't bear to open it. He couldn't bear to throw it out. So it sat there, year after year, a silent witness to a father's greatest regret, living with a ghost in a box. Out in public, Dean Martin carried on, at least for a while. He still appeared on stage, still smiled for cameras, still played the role he'd crafted so perfectly over the decades. But something had changed. The easy charm felt heavier now. The laugh didn't ring quite as true. The eyes behind the jokes looked tired. He had lost his son, Dean Paul. He had endured more tragedy than most men ever do. But this was different. This time, it wasn't just loss. It was guilt. Guilt over the fight. Guilt over the words he'd thrown in anger. Guilt over the gift and the letter that had sat, untouched, in a cabinet while time ran out. He would walk into his study sometimes, reach for a book, open a drawer, and every time he knew the box was there, waiting, accusing, forgiving. He could never quite decide which. He never told the story publicly. It wasn't material for a monologue. It wasn't a late-night anecdote. It was too raw, too private. So the years passed. His body weakened. His circle grew smaller. And still, the box waited. Until one night near the end, when someone else finally found it. The night the box came back. Fast forward to that Christmas Eve. Dean is older now, weaker. His once magnetic presence reduced to a quiet figure in a big chair surrounded by memories, photographs of his children, frames on mantels, faces frozen in happier times. His daughter Gail has taken it upon herself to help organize things, to go through papers, boxes, drawers, tucking some things away, letting others go. In the back of that small study cabinet, her hand brushes against something wrapped. She pulls it out, dust dancing in the air. A small box, old paper, red ribbon. And then she sees the handwriting. To Gina, from Daddy. Open it. When you're ready. Her throat tightens. Gina is gone, has been for years. And yet, here is a gift, waiting for her. Gail doesn't open it. Somehow that feels wrong, like breaking into a conversation that never got to happen. Instead, she walks straight to the living room, where Dean is sitting in the glow of the television. "Daddy," she says softly, her voice already trembling. "I found something." He barely glances up at first. He's used to things being found. Old scripts, old photos, old fan letters. But when she steps closer, the box catches his eye. The color drains from his face. He knows exactly what it is. "Where did you get that?" he asks, his voice suddenly fragile. "In your study," she replies. "Back of the cabinet." She hesitates. "Daddy, was this for Gina?" He doesn't answer, but he doesn't need to. His eyes say everything. He reaches out and takes the box in his hands. It's light, so small, so ordinary, and yet to him it feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Gale sits beside him. "Why didn't you ever give it to her?" she whispers. Dean stares at the box, his fingers tracing the edge of the ribbon. "I was waiting," he says quietly, "for the right moment, for when the air was clear, for when we were better." He swallows hard. "I thought there would always be another day." Gale's eyes fill with tears. There is nothing she can say to that, because there is no answer to it. They sit in silence. Outside, distant carolers sing. Inside, the clock ticks. Finally, Gale speaks. "Daddy, maybe this is the moment. Maybe you're not too late to open it. Maybe you both need this." He looks at her slowly. "You think so?" he asks. And suddenly he doesn't sound like Dean Martin, the star. He sounds like a father, lost, unsure, hurting. "I do," she says simply. "For you, and for her." The king of cool breaks. Dean takes a deep breath, the kind you take before stepping onto a stage, not to impress an audience, but to survive what's coming. His fingers fumble with the ribbon. The paper crackles, old and delicate. As he peels it back, years of buried emotion peel back with it. He opens the box. Inside, lying exactly as he'd left it all those years ago, is the small gold heart-shaped locket. G.D. He picks it up slowly, like holding something holy. He opens it. On one side, Gina, laughing, bright, full of life. On the other, himself, younger. Eyes alive, smile real, standing in that kitchen with an apron on and a pan in his hand, while she clings to his back. For a moment, Dean says nothing. Then his shoulders begin to shake. Gale watches as the image of her father, the unshakable, unflappable Dean Martin, begins to crumble right in front of her. He brings the locket to his lips, closes his eyes, and whispers something only Gina can hear. Then he notices the folded paper beneath it. His letter. He unfolds it with trembling hands. As he reads the first line, the air seems to leave his lungs. These are his own words. But it feels like someone else wrote them. A younger man. A braver man. A father who was still hopeful enough to put his heart on paper. He reads, "Dear Gina, I know sometimes you think I don't understand you." His voice breaks on the second sentence. Gale moves closer, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. He tries to keep reading, but each line hits him harder. "The truth is, I'm just a man who doesn't always know how to say what he feels." He stops, unable to go on. Tears begin to roll down his cheeks, slowly at first, then freely, years of grief and guilt pouring out at once. He had written this to save their relationship, to tell her the truth, to say the words he could never say out loud. But he never delivered it. And now, the only one who can hear it is him. Gale quietly takes the letter from his shaking hands. "Daddy," she asks softly, "do you want me to read it?" He nods, unable to speak. So she does, line by line, word by word. She reads about his fear of losing her, his awareness of his own failures, his wish that she would remember the pancakes, the laughter, the little moments, not the absences. She reads, "You are not Dean Martin's daughter to me. You are simply my Gina. That's all that has ever really mattered." And finally, "I love you more than any song I ever sang, more than any applause I ever heard, more than any crowd that ever called my name. Your forever daddy, Dean." By the time she finishes, Dean is no longer sitting upright. He has slid forward, the box clutched in one hand, the locket wrapped in the other. He sinks to his knees on the carpet. The man who once stood tall under the brightest lights in the world now kneels in the quiet shadow of his own living room. Gale kneels with him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders as he cries into her chest. "I'm sorry," he whispers hoarsely. "I'm so, so sorry." It isn't just to Gina anymore. It's to all his children, to all the missed moments, to all the times he chose the stage over the living room, the show over the dinner table. But most of all, It's to the young father who thought there would always be more time. What that gift really was. That box did not just hold a locket and a letter. It held something far heavier, a father's unspoken apology, a daughter's unanswered questions, years of love that never found the right moment. For decades, Dean Martin had been known for three things: his voice, his charm, and his calm. People joked that nothing could shake him, not live TV, not hecklers, not even the mob, but this small, forgotten gift, this little box meant for a daughter who never received it, did what nothing else ever could. It broke him. And yet, in that breaking, there was something else, a strange kind of peace, because as painful as it was, opening that gift forced Dean to face the truth he had avoided for so long. He had loved his daughter. He had failed her in some ways. He had been too proud, too afraid, too late. But the love was real. It was there in the letter, in the pictures, in the locket, in the man on his knees, finally crying for the child he lost and the words he never said. The father. Behind the legend, Dean Martin died 2 years later, on Christmas Day, 1995. To the world, the headlines were about the passing of a legend, Rat Pack icon gone, King of Cool dead at 78, end of an era. People remembered the songs, the films, the jokes, the tuxedos, the cigarette and the glass of whiskey, but his family remembered something else. They remembered the man behind closed doors, sitting quietly with a small gold locket in his hand, running his thumb over the engraved letters G.D. They remembered a father who, in the end, was no different from any other grieving parent, full of love, full of regrets, full of wishes for one more conversation, one more hug, one more chance, one more day. Why this story matters. The story of Dean Martin and that unopened gift is not just about a celebrity or a famous name, it's about something universal. How often we wait. How often we hold back the words we need to say. How easily we assume we have more time. We tell ourselves, I'll call them later. I'll apologize tomorrow. I'll explain when things calm down. We buy the gift. We write the message, we plan the moment, and then life happens. Phones ring, accidents occur, people disappear, and all that's left is a box on a shelf that someone else finds years later. If there is anything to take away from the image of Dean Martin kneeling on his living room floor, clutching that little locket, it's this: don't wait to say what matters. Don't assume there will be another day, another visit, another holiday. If you love someone, tell them. If you owe someone an apology, give it. If there's a gift you've been saving for the right time, maybe the right time is now. Because for all his fame, all his power, and all the people who adored him, there was one thing even Dean Martin couldn't control: time.